I invite now my co-chair, His Excellency Jean-Noël Barrot, Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs of France, to make an opening statement.
Monsieur le Secrétaire,
Secretary General, President of the General Assembly, Prime Ministers, Ministers, ladies and gentlemen. Having learned through his history, which is blood-spattered with fratricidal wars, loyal to the foundational principles of the United Nations established 80 years ago, France acknowledges that it is the sacred right of peoples to determine their own fate. There is nothing more precious for people than the dignity of to be free and to be standing on the land from which it takes its roots, because depriving people of these rights inevitably leads to resentment, violence, and war. And that is why France is standing side by side with Israel, when after a long history of exile and persecution, it finally had a land, it finally had a state, and entered into the community of nations as a free people. And the France stood by Israel, mobilizing its diplomatic and military power every time his right to an existence was challenged or threatened. This was done in the name of the millennia-long relationship between France and the Jewish people, and in the name of the rights of people to determine their own fate. France acknowledges and recognizes this same right with the Palestinian people, the right to have their own homeland. And that is why France considers that the only alternative to the long cycle of violence is a prospect of having these two people having two states living side by side in peace and security. And this is the solution that France has been upholding constantly for decades. This was done through General de Gaulle, who in 1967 stated that the settlement of the conflict should be based on the recognition by each of the states in question by all others. This was done by François Mitterrand, who in 1982 stated in the Knesset that a dialogue means a prior and mutual recognition of the right of others to exist. This was done by Jacques Chirac, who in 1996 spoke in front of the Palestinian Legislative Council and stated that the Palestinian people have a natural aspiration to determine their own fate and to have a state. This was done through the voice of all of their successors, and particularly through the voice of President Macron. But we're now at a time where this prospect of having two states recognized and respected in all of their rights is today in mortal danger. It was threatened by the barbarous attack of the 7th of October, the worst anti-Semitic massacre since the Holocaust, by the extraordinary unleashing of savagery and cruelty of the Hamas terrorists in the intimity of kibbutz and on the eucalyptus trees of the Nova Festival, in the disfigured shadows of 1,200 innocents who were brutally murdered then, including 50 French nationals who are still mourning now together with Israel, through the terrible fate of the hostages who are still in the black hole of captivity and whose immediate return we are demanding, and for those who are still trying to mourn. After wounds going so deep, how can one imagine peaceful coexistence? This idea was challenged and threatened by an indefinite extension of military operations of Israel in Gaza, which for a long time no longer have military or political justification. Massive displacements of populations, civilian victims in the tens of thousands, families turned apart, places of worship, hospitals, and schools bombed, humanitarian food distribution becoming bloodbath. Devastated by war, Gaza is today a charnel house where the corpses are looking famished and the spirits are becoming desperate. After so much suffering, how can we be thinking of peace? This idea is also threatened by the accelerated pace of the settlements in the West Bank, by the extremist settlements who are uprooting olive trees, burning schools, and chasing Palestinians away from their houses under the lenient eyes of the Israeli authorities, by the mixing up of the Palestinian Authority in such a way that undermines the very possibility of a state to exist, and by the Knesset, who last week voted in favor of complete annexation of the West Bank. Given these facts, how can one remain hopeful? On both sides, those who are rejecting these ideas seem to be winning. In those who are saying that the Palestine has to be from Jordan to the sea on the one hand, and those who are dreaming of the great Israel on the other hand, and the idea of the two states is moving farther and farther away. We absolutely cannot resign ourselves to this situation, and we cannot wait any longer because time is against us. After 22 months of attempts, it is an illusion to think that a ceasefire, lasting one, can obtained without a general view of what Gaza is going to be after the war, without a political horizon on an alternative to permanent war. And that is why we undertook the initiative, together with Saudi Arabia, a major great country in the Middle East, to launch a collective endeavor to revive the two-state solution. And we would like to thank all of those countries who have joined us in this endeavor and who have worked tirelessly on this for the past 6 months, because this collective undertaking, this conference convened by the United Nations General Assembly, has already resulted in historic commitments which lead us to a new hope. This was expressed in the letter sent by the President of the Palestinian Authority to the President of the Republic and to the Crown Prince. And this letter, for the first time, he condemns the terrorist attacks of the 7th October. He calls for an immediate release of hostages detained by Hamas, asks for Hamas's disarmament and its exclusion from the governance of Gaza, and confirms towards the end that the payments to the families of terrorists will be stopped. He announces a school reform and undertakes to organize presidential and legislative elections in 2026, and accepts that the Palestinian state will be demilitarized. And there we have all of the conditions stipulated by the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in his speech in 2009 in Bar el-Inam, when he was talking about the preconditions for the Palestinian state. After that, we had an extraordinary meeting between the Israeli and Palestinian civil society representative on the 13th of June, and they together jointly launched the Appeal of Paris to guarantee the security of Israel, working towards a regional integration and towards recognizing the state of Palestine. And this also includes the denunciation by Saudi Arabia and the Arab countries present here today in New York, the denunciation of the crimes of Hamas, the appeal for the for Hamas's disarming, and the expression of hope that they will have normalized relations with Israel and have Israel have normal regional integration. As was stated by the President of the Republic in response to the letter by the President of the Palestinian Authority on the 24th July, in the light of the historic commitments that have already been undertaken and those which will follow, in the name of the eternal rights of people to determine their own fate, at the time where the two-state solution is more threatened than ever, France is ready to fully recognize the state of Palestine and will do so in the month of September next. This recognition, which is a major decision by France, is an expression of both a rejection and it is an appeal. It is a rejection of the idea that the war camp is winning over the peace camp. It is rejection of the idea that Hamas is right when they kept contesting the right of Israel to exist. Hamas, who always fought this two-state solution for this reason. But Palestine is not, and it will never be, Hamas. Recognizing the state of Palestine today is to bolster those Palestinians who chose nonviolence, who decided to renounce terrorism and recognize Israel. It means creating for the Palestinians the possibility of having an alternative. It's denouncing Hamas and isolating it for good. It is also a rejection of allowing the extremists in Israel to say that the Palestinians have no right to exist, and when they propagate violence through hatred and to the detriment of security interest of their own country. It's a rejection of the resignation that some in the international community and its leaders have when they tend to give up. It's a resignation when they say that nothing can be done. But this is something that we in France reject. We today have an opportunity to save the peace process. It is our historic responsibility, and it is our honor to take this opportunity. This recognition, which is a major decision by France, it is also an appeal, a call, an appeal to all of the people and countries in the world. Please bring in your contribution to this edifice of peace. Rejoin the irreversible trend that we have launched with Saudi Arabia by participating in the meeting of heads of state and governments, which will take place in September at the time of the United Nations General Assembly. It is also an appeal to those countries who have not yet recognized the state of Palestine. It is today that your decision will have the maximum impact on the way things develop. Waiting for Hamas to disarm before you recognize the state of Palestine, this means that you put the decision in the hands of Hamas. Yitzhak Rabin understood it very well because he fought terrorism as though the peace process did not exist, and he pursued the peace process as though there were no terrorism. It is by recognizing Palestine today, that you will create the condition for Hamas's elimination. This is all an appeal to the Arab and Muslim countries. Please cut at the root the rejection of Israel, which is feeding anti-Semitism, extremism, and terrorism. Retake the road of normalization with Israel. Show that the Israelis are winning when they are working on a regional security architecture by bringing everyone together with their neighbors. This requires courage, but courage is something that you have. This is an appeal to the government of Israel. Listen to the indignation throughout the world. Take the hand that's stretched out to you to find a way out of this. Open the eyes to the aspirations your neighbors have to live in peace and security with you. Cease the fire. Lift the humanitarian blockade on Gaza. Lift the financial blockade on the Palestinian Authority. Reject annexation project. It is in the interest of Israel and Israel's security. This is finally an appeal to the two people, the Israeli and the Palestinian people, who have been so tried by history and suffered so much through war. To Raim, which I was 1 year after the 7th of October in El Arish, several kilometers from Gaza in ruin. I have seen it with my own eyes. I've seen the depths into which this has plunged you. Please oppose the violence through the strength of your mind and spirit. Continue with the path forged by Rabin, Arafat, and those people who were working on peace. Make sure that your children grow up without secular hatred and destructive resentment. Take the rich trail necessary between necessary compromise and intransigence on the essential, because this is the only road towards reconciliation. We are aware of the special responsibility towards peace and security in the world. We are determined to break the spiral of violence in the Middle East. And we are indifferent to the attacks from those who want to dissuade us from doing that. France is ready to fully recognize the state of Palestine and will do so in the month of September. This is to build a new alliance between the people in the region based on justice, mutual recognition, and shared humanity. And to close the terrible chapter on war and to open a long-awaited chapter on peace.